And we will be recording this presentation just so that we can post it on our website later for those unable to join live. So yeah, thanks for joining. My name is Brianne. I'm the manager for the Homeless Contribution Tax Credit and super excited to share about this program and opportunity with you.
All right, so on today's agenda, if we could first have just everyone as you're joining, write your name and the organization you're with in the chat. That way we can kind of keep track of who's joining us today. But like I said, I'm Sydney, I'm the coordinator with the program. You'll hear it called HCTC, that's shorter for Homeless Contribution Income Tax Credit Program. So done our introductions, we will go through a brief overview of the Department of Local Affairs, which is the department of the state where HCTC is housed, overview of HCTC itself, and then we'll dive a little deeper into the program and project guidelines to hopefully help you fill out the eligibility application, and then run through what contributions and certificates look like, talk about our program monitoring requirements, and then at the very end, we will go over how to submit for eligibility. And we will have time at the end for questions and answers as well. So I'll go ahead and pass it over to Brianne so that she can give you guys an overview.
Thank you, Sydney. So some of you may already be familiar with the Department of Local Affairs, the Office of Homeless Initiatives, but just wanted to give you a framework for where HCTC is located within the state structure. And so the overarching department is the Department of Local Affairs, which houses the Division of Local Government and the Division of Housing. And so within the Division of Housing, there are rental assistance vouchers. They really are trying to increase and preserve Colorado's inventory of affordable housing. They regulate mobile home parks and also house the Office of Homeless Initiatives. And so that is where HCTC calls our home. Some of your organizations looking in the chat, I believe, already interface with DOH or OHI, which is the Office of Homeless Initiatives. And so we're excited about this potential new touch point for HCTC to just be another opportunity for OHI to connect with you in the community to really advanced solutions that combine affordable housing with accessible services so that no one languishes in homelessness, which is kind of the overall goal. And we're going to talk a little bit more about HCTC specifically in the following slides. So HCTC was born basically in 2022 when the bill was passed, House Bill 2022-1083, that created the statutes that we go by now in implementing the program. And so HCTC actually took effect of January 1st of this year. So it was a quick turnaround on-ramp to get everything up and running for this new tax credit. And really, we've been building the program throughout this year as we go. This is our first outreach opportunity to new organizations for the new year. So we're excited to welcome people for 2024. And we really have tried to incorporate nonprofit feedback as much as possible to make sure that the program is accessible, usable, as much as possible with the regulations we have to adhere to as well. And really the purpose of the tax credit is to encourage taxpayers to contribute to approved organizations, ultimately supporting housing and services to those experiencing homelessness. And so it's ultimately an incentive in some ways for donors to contribute to your organization, either initially, or if you have a donor who's already bought into your organization, maybe they'll give a little more if they get a tax credit in return for their contribution. And so, yeah, this is an opportunity to hopefully fund more of your housing and services to those experiencing homelessness. The HCTC does replace a previous tax credit available through the enterprise zone for homeless serving programs. And so the enterprise zone was restricted to certain locations, and it also had an economic focus, whereas, as we'll talk about later, HCTC really does have a homelessness focus, which we think is a good thing to really have that support for those programs within our state. And we do have a website that we'll be referring to throughout the presentation. If Sydney, would you mind putting a link to that in the chat that you can refer to as well? So we will be going over some general information. If you are an organization that wants to participate in HCTC next year, there is an application process, basically an eligibility form for you to complete. And so the information we're sharing is hopefully to help you, one, decide if you want to participate in HCTC, if you might be a good fit based on your programming, and also what to think about if you're going to be submitting an application. What are some things that you'll need to know in advance? So, first of all, your organization must have 501c3 status, and your services must have a primary focus on homelessness. So we know some nonprofits have multiple populations that you may work with. Maybe you have a program that's for both people who are low income and are housed, or also people who are experiencing homelessness. And so just encourage you to think about, do you have a program or service that does have a primary focus on homelessness? And potentially applying for those specific services. And within your application, you'll have the opportunity to select projects to submit, and those can be operational services or capital campaigns, which we'll go into detail in just a moment. But a project location actually determines the tax credit amount for your donors. So if you are located in a non-rural area, then your project location, depending on the USDA designations, would be considered non-rural, and that tax credit would be 25% for your donors. If you're in a rural location, that tax credit would be 30%. So, two different project categories, as I mentioned. So these are the activities that are eligible for operational services. The first six are pretty straightforward, directly to those experiencing homelessness: outreach efforts, shelter, supportive housing, employment outcome or job training type services, case management, or domestic violence shelter and services. Prevention, number 7, is another opportunity for those who are at imminent risk for experiencing homelessness. And so a lot of the times this comes in the form of rental assistance. And so we do look at, how does the organization define imminent risk? We are currently using the HUD definition for imminent risk. If this is something you're not familiar with, or you're not currently using really any screening for imminent risk for those you're providing assistance to, then that's something to think about, or reach out to us if you have questions on. And then number 8 is kind of a general category for other emerging best practices. And so I would definitely encourage, if this is the category that you're really looking at, to reach out to us to talk about it and see if we think it's a potential good fit for HCTC or not. Could be, but we just want to talk about it since it would be a new type of category. So happy to run that by with you. I also want to point out that if your organization provides multiple of these services, you can bundle them together, so to speak, in one project. So if you have a shelter where you also provide job training, you also have case management, you could have all of those services within one project that you submit. And a lot of times our organizations find that to be beneficial for their budgets as they're tracking their HCTC donations, to just have it all in one project, have, all of their services bundled together. Capital campaign is another option. And so this could be supportive housing, shelter, or facilities used to provide the services that I just went over on the previous slide. So an administrative building, for example, would qualify. One item to note is that capital campaigns must begin construction within 3 years of approval. So if you have a capital campaign that is about to launch or has launched, but you're not really sure when construction will begin, I would encourage you to hold off on submitting an application for that capital campaign project. There are implications for taxpayers if you don't begin construction within that time frame, and so better to be safe than sorry if you don't have an implementation date in mind yet. So this slide gets a little complex on our project guidelines. And part of that is because of how the statute is structured, but I do want to go over it as you're thinking about potentially submitting an application and how many projects you want to submit and how those are going to be structured. So this example diagram is just an example, and it's an example of a large organization. So it may not, apply to your organization. You may just have one project. Awesome, easy peasy. But some organizations really want to think through strategically with their fundraising, how to maximize their tax credit amounts. And so did want to review this briefly. So just hang tight. So each organization is going to have a primary project. And so for this organization, this is project A. It's operational services, maybe a shelter or something like that. And so in this organization, let's say they're located in a non-rural area. In that case, project A can accrue up to $750,000 in tax credits, which would equal $3 million in contributions for this one project. So that's quite a lot for some organizations. If you had additional services or additional capital campaign that you wanted available for donors to contribute to, there is basically a separate bucket of tax credits that can accrue. So in this organization example, Project B and Project C have a combined maximum of $750,000 in credits that can accrue throughout the tax year. And so ultimately the organization could potentially accrue up to 1.5 million in tax credits or 6 million in total contributions that come in. It just depends kind of on how the structure of how those donations come in. So if project A hits the 750,000 maximum, that means a donor who submits a donation to project A, after that point would not get the tax credit. But they could contribute to the capital campaign if there was still room left within that separate $750,000 bucket. So it's a little complex, but some of our organizations really think through, okay, how do I want to set this up so that I can set up my contributions to be most effective. If you just have two projects, maybe you have services for your first project and then you have a capital campaign that you want to add later on or something, that's a lot simpler. You would just have two buckets of $750,000 in credits for each. So if you do have questions on this, feel free to put them in the chat or whatnot, but wanted to go over that briefly. And now Sydney's going to talk about what to expect if you were to submit an application and were approved, some of the administrative responsibilities to maybe expect next year and to really have on your mind as you're preparing to potentially participate next year.
Thanks, Brianne. So yes, like Brianne said, just keeping you in mind, like the full well-rounded picture of what being involved with HCTC can look like after submitting that eligibility form. So let's say first step, obviously, submit your eligibility form. It's approved, your projects are approved. Just so that you're aware, we do have on our website a list of eligible nonprofits and their projects available for any Colorado taxpayer to view, and then just brief descriptions of those projects. So you would then be included there. So once you're approved, good to go with HCTC, then that natural next step is that your donors start contributing. So first and foremost, there are a few qualifications for the actual contribution itself to be eligible for HCTC. First one is that we do have donation minimums. And so that starts with any monetary donations must be of at least $100 or more. Organizations can implement a higher minimum if they'd like to. We know that for some smaller organizations or newer organizations, they might not have the administrative capability to enter a contribution every time they get $100. And that is completely fine. We have quite a few organizations that have implemented a $250 minimum donation requirement. As long as that's communicated to your donors, that's completely fine. We want this program to work as successfully for you and your staff and for your donors as possible. So as we go through the next few slides, you'll see we have a lot of options available for how to operate the program. In-kind donations must be appraised at over $5,000. That stays the same for every organization. And kind of like Brianne was mentioning earlier, it is important that contributions that are receiving the tax credit are designated and restricted to those programs that are approved for HCTC. So when contributions are entered, you'll have to select the project that money is going to. And it is the nonprofit's responsibility to track that in their financial records. And also keep in mind that donors can opt in or out of HCTC at any time. It's not just because they are donating $100 to an approved project doesn't mean that they automatically receive the tax credit if they don't want it. We recommend that any donor writes HCTC in the memo line of a check, or maybe if you have an online donation portal, you're able to have like a notes section and they can type HCTC there, or even a checkbox. However it works best for you and your donors to designate they want the tax credit, that's definitely what we recommend. It's also important to keep in mind that donors can be individual taxpayers or businesses as well. Either will work and can qualify for HCTC. Next slide, please. So, all right, so you have the contribution. It meets all of our qualifying requirements of going towards the specific project, meeting the minimum donation amount, and being designated towards HCTC. So now you can submit the contribution into Salesforce. Salesforce is the platform that we use if you're submitting your eligibility form to keep track of contributions and to send tax credit. So we do have that available for you. When you are submitting a contribution, you'll need the donor's information in order to get through that process. So that includes their full name, address, and their full social security number. It must be the full social. It can't be just the last four. That is a requirement by our statute that that full social number is on the tax certificate itself. So that will need to be entered at the time of the contribution. Now we have a few options to how to enter those contributions. You can enter them, you and your staff can enter them into Salesforce, having all of that donor information right in front of you. Or if you have any donors who are not comfortable sharing their full social security number or anything like that, we do have a donor submission Salesforce form as well. So you can supply that to your donors who are communicating that with you. We have guides and videos available for donors to follow to hopefully make it a smooth and easy process for everybody involved at your organization. Of course, we have guides and videos available for you as well, but we have that donor piece as well. We are asking that contributions are submitted on a minimum quarterly basis. This is to just help with the flow of work throughout the year. Since the HCTC program operates on the tax year, and we know that giving season is at the very end of the tax year, your busy season, we don't want to have to have you rush or anything to enter all of your contributions for an entire year while you're still getting $1 million a day, basically. So we have those quarterly deadlines to help space out the work, and that does go towards nonprofit submissions and donor submissions. Brianna and I are super understanding and flexible with things, so we understand if donors are not submitting things on the quarterly deadline. We get it. We're just trying to help you with your workload throughout the year. And when submitting contributions, any donation that is over $5,000, cash or in kind, documentation will need to be submitted for that. So that could be a copy of the check or like the acknowledgement letter. If your organization sends those to your donors, like, hey, we received your donation of $5,001. Thank you for that. That can be uploaded as well. So lots of options there too. Next slide. All right, so the contribution is in Salesforce. Everything's good to go. Now you are responsible for sending the tax credit certificate. We have some options. Like I said, we love to give options for this program to make it as easy for your organization as possible. So you can choose when your organization, how frequently they send out certificates. This does have to be an organization-wide decision. It cannot be per donor. So keep that in mind as you're thinking through that when you're filling out your, excuse me, eligibility form. So our three options are immediately, quarterly, or annually sending certificates. With immediate frequency, you could potentially receive a donation, enter it into Salesforce, and send the tax certificate all in that same day. It can all be done in one full swoop, or you can, if you wait to enter your contributions till the end of the week, sending the certificates in, however you want that, but that certificate is available as soon as you enter it into Salesforce. So that's our immediate process. With quarterly, kind of going along with entering quarterly contributions deadline, you can enter your contributions throughout the quarter, and then at the end of the quarter, the day after it ends, then the certificates are available. So you're able to send out, if you have a donor who, let's say, contributes every single month, at the end of the quarter, they would get an aggregate certificate for each donation that they made throughout the quarter. Then they would only have 4 certificates to submit with their taxes during tax season the following year. And our final option is annually. This is our preferred method at Ojai. This helps to combine every single donation throughout that tax year onto one certificate. So Salesforce will automatically calculate what the contribution total was and then what the tax credit amount, either that 25 or 30% based on rural or non-rural designation, like Brianne talked about. And it'll have that ready to go for the entire year. And then the taxpayer just has one certificate that they submit when they file their taxes. Certificates are available to send from Salesforce, and they can either be sent via email or postal mail. And I'll go over that in the next slide. Okay, so the taxpayer is ready to get their certificates. So if they have an email on file when you submitted the contribution, it's super easy. You just click a send button and the donor receives a secure link to Salesforce, and all they have to do is enter basically like the pass key that they receive, their first and last name, and the last four of their social, and they're able to access their certificate right there. There's no, you have to draft the email or you have to add the attachments, anything like that. It just goes straight from Salesforce, good to go. Mailing certificates is just as easy. If you have donors who don't have an email or would prefer not to use their email for their certificates, totally understandable. You can view a PDF of the certificate, print it out, fold it up, and put it in the mail, good to go, and they'll receive it that way. We use the secure email link process because, like I mentioned earlier, the full social security number is on that certificate. So just keep that in mind. You have those options for what's best for your donors. Next slide, please. All right, so I know I just went through a lot of like the administrative stuff, really getting into what your day-to-day might look like once you're participating with HCTC, but I do just want to go over our reporting and monitoring as well, just to give you, again, that well-rounded understanding of what participating in HCTC looks like. So once you submit your eligibility certification, that certification lasts for 4 years. So if you're applying this year to be ready for January 1st of 2024, you won't have to reapply until the fall of 2027 to be ready to go for 2028. So it's not a yearly thing or anything, it's 4 whole years. So that's really nice. Each fall, we do an organization and project review. That's more of like a conversation, like, hey, are these still the goals of these projects? Anything changing within your organization? Do you guys have a capital campaign coming up that you'd like to add for the next year? Things like that. Again, more of a conversation. In January of each year, that's when we'll ask for our annual reporting on outcomes and outputs, more of that data-driven report. If your organization uses HMIS or CAFE already, then you'll be able to just pull one of the pre-made reports in there, and that's what we'll be looking for. So super easy. If your organization does not have HMIS or CAFE, that's okay. It doesn't make things any harder. It does not disqualify you from being eligible. We'll just send you a good old-fashioned spreadsheet of the data that we're looking for. Next slide, please. All right, so I know we just threw a ton of information at you, a ton of details, even though I promise there are more details that we could even get into, but we'd love to save that for orientation or once you're getting involved with us. But I do just want to share that this is where HCTC is working already in our state, just in our first 9 months of like our startup year, basically. So we already have 70 participating organizations and 91 projects throughout those organizations, all throughout the state. Most of them are in urban communities, but we do have 13% in serving rural communities. And already this year, we expect to see these numbers just like jump up after giving season and as we wrap up the end of the tax year. But already in 2023, we have $2.5 million worth of eligible contributions for only a little over 1,000 contributions throughout these 70 organizations. So as these numbers keep growing, we would love for this program to keep growing and for you all to join in, help provide these amazing services that you give to your communities and give back a little bit to your donors that help you operate. And so with that, I'll go ahead and pass it back to Brianne, and she can show you how to submit your eligibility form.
Yeah, thank you, Sydney. Like she said, we'll be going over, if you are approved as an eligible organization, we'll be going over an orientation that goes into detail of expectations and everything for next year. So no need to take detailed notes on that, but it's good to know for your application and thinking about your administrative responsibilities. So we've been talking about application eligibility form throughout this presentation. So I'm going to show you on our website where to go for submitting that form and some resources we have for you. We are asking for the form to be submitted by October 15th for participating in tax year 2024. So one of the main reasons for that is because by statute in November, we're supposed to have up a list of the participating organizations for next year on our website posted, as well as we're just wanting to get you in the program, get you started, get you prepared so that you're ready to basically get going on January 1st. And that's, I know, during a super busy season for nonprofits. And so we're asking for you to get ahead of the game and submit by October 15th. If you do not submit by October 15th, we will be reviewing applications on a rolling basis after that point. But for instance, if an organization waits until December, there's not really a guarantee we're going to be able to get that reviewed in time for you to issue tax credits on January 1st, for example. And so trying to make sure that you're set up for success for next year. So are you able to see the website? Okay, awesome. So this is our webpage, and so this is the list of our current organizations that are approved, and you can scroll down. There's information for participating organizations, and then there's information for organizations interested in participating in HCTC, hopefully you all. And so this is where you would click to actually register to get started, but I'm going to go over a little bit our resources we have here. So we do have a user guide for Salesforce. If you're having any trouble navigating the system, please refer to this document, and it really goes step by step into explaining each aspect of the system. We also have a eligibility verification checklist that really goes into detail each of the questions, each of the fields that are asked on the eligibility verification form. So those are listed here with some tips on how to answer some of those questions. It also lists documentation that is required for submitting your application. You will need a letter of support from your board of directors. You will need a certificate of good standing from the Secretary of State and a recent audit or financial report. An optional letter of support is from your local continuum of care organization as well. And we also have here listed some things to think through if you're thinking about how to structure your projects that you want to submit. These are some questions that are good to think about. Also here under resources on the website, we have templates for the support letters. These are by no means prescriptive. If your board wants to just go for writing a letter independently, that's totally fine. But some organizations like to have some guidelines as far as what we're looking for. So we do provide that as well. So once you're actually ready to register and get started on your application, this is the link that you would click. But I do want to share that in order to access the Salesforce platform, it's required to set up multi-factor authentication through the Salesforce Authenticator app. The reason for this is because organizations that are already approved, they use the same login form to access the secure information of their donors. And so we have this as a security measure. And if you do have issues with downloading and using the app, we do have a step-by-step guide available here on the website. But here I'm just going to show you the registration initial form. So if your organization has not logged in yet, this is what it would look like. This is a privacy statement that we have to talk about the personal identifying information and that you're acknowledging the privacy statement here. And then this is the registration where you would put your name, email, organization, and FEIN. The FEIN has given a couple of people some issues if they put the dash or hyphen in the number. So this will only be accepted if you put the number, 9 digits only, and not the hyphen. And then you would put a password of your choosing so that you can log in and finish your form later if you'd like. Each organization needs to have just one registration. So if you have multiple people you want to have access to submitting the form or anything, we can provide that to you by setting up on the back end another user for your organization if that's needed. But yeah, once you hit sign up, it's going to prompt you to set up the Authenticator app, and then you'll be able to go into Salesforce and access the form, which I'm not going to go into detail since we do have this eligibility Salesforce guide here for you. So I also want to share our contact information, our website, and the best email to reach us is included in the chat from Sydney. So yeah, just please reach out with any questions. We're happy to answer your questions and concerns that you may have. And speaking of questions, I believe we do have one in the chat from Sharon. If our organization provides both homeless serving programs and easy tax credit initiatives, can organizations participate in both? I think it depends on how your organization is set up. If they are totally separate projects, totally separate budgets that you're looking at, then yes, you could have both. There are some projects that some people have reached out to us about that would be an either or scenario. For example, a permanent supportive housing project could be eligible for HCTC, but it could possibly also be eligible for workforce housing within enterprise zone. And so in that situation, the organization would have to decide which tax credit they want to go for. So I don't know in your situation if you're thinking about two totally separate programs. But if that's the case, if they are totally separate budgets, then you could participate in both. Basically, a donor can't receive tax credits for both, for one donation for both tax credit programs. Laura has a hand up.
Yes, hi. Thank you. This is really helpful. I'm a contract grant writer for Dream Centers. And so they actually have been transitioned over to the HCTC program from the Enterprise Zone program. And so I have a couple questions about their process and where they're at right now. So they are filling out an Excel document. I don't know if this is the name it had when you gave it to them, but it's like a Excel spreadsheet, and it has questions like nonprofit best practices, organization track record, donation tracking. So is this part of what would be like the annual fall review of their project? Because they're not applying, correct? Because they have been transitioned into the program. So is this just part of their review process? I see you
Correct.
nodding. So yeah, okay. And then because they've been transitioned, are they, after they complete this fall review, are they good for 4 years as well? Is this starting their 4-year approval?
So their 4 years began this year in 2023.
Okay. Okay. And then just one specific question on this Excel spreadsheet. It asks for the goals. And it says list the goals addressed by this project. And I just wanted to clarify, are you looking for their organization goals for the project, or are you looking for the goals, the HTCT like project category goals? Are you looking like, does this project, is the goal supportive housing or case management or whatever? Or are you looking for the goals that the organization has defined and how those align with the project categories?
The second one, the goals
Okay.
that the organization has for the project that align with HCTC.
Okay.
It's really just to, when we mentioned at the start that our website has a list of eligible nonprofits and their projects, think of like this being that information that supports what the project is doing that a taxpayer could contribute to.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. That's great. I think those are all of my questions. So thank you.
Great.
Yeah, and for Sharon, those are somewhat relevant questions as well, because those are questions that are asked in the eligibility form as well, as far as the goals for your project and everything. So thank you for the questions. Anything else on your mind while we have you on the call? Okay. Hearing none, we'll go ahead and stop recording.
Sharon is asking if a copy of the slide deck will be shared.